Hi, Ray.
Hey, hi everybody. Welcome to the green room. We are doing our kind of backstage, kind of quick intros as the guests get to meet everybody, learn what they're doing. I'm going to start with the team. So I'm going to go with Aubrey. So Aubrey, please introduce yourself. Go to Vala, and then I'm going to quickly introduce Tom as well as Michael. So go ahead.
Hi, I'm Aubrey Coggins. I am the producer of DisrupTV based in the Sacramento suburbs now. Hi.
Woohoo. Welcome to California.
Hi, everyone. Vala Afshar from Boston. This is episode 193. This is our 585 interviews that Ray and I are doing. So proud to have Tom and Michael with us today.
Yeah, same here. And Tom, what are you going to be talking today? Do quick intros. I know everybody knows who you are, but do quick intros and a little bit of what you're going to be talking about.
My intro, and this will only make any sense to somebody who's around Boston. I would love to be driving up from New Bedford to Boston so that I could experience driving on I-93 at 75 miles an hour instead of 7 miles an hour. I mean, it'd be like the biggest breakthrough in my entire life. The practical answer is that I am 13 miles from New Bedford, Massachusetts, once the richest city in the United States of America, until a bunch of dorks in Pennsylvania found hydrocarbons and we went out of the whale oil business, went into the textile business, and now it's a somewhat struggling town of about 90,000, with, which I will explain later, the world's greatest police chief in terms of how he has reacted to the protests in the last 48 hours. The only problem is when I explain it, I'll weep.
All right, so much for Titusville. Michael, on your end, quick introductions on you, what you're going to talk a little bit about, and of course, where you're calling in from.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm calling in from
Pennsylvania.
I'm calling in from San Diego today, and I'm going to probably talk around the declining need of permission and how it creates competitive advantage.
That's awesome, man. And you're in San Diego at the moment, so.
San Diego, yeah, totally.
All right, that's very, very cool. All right, so this is our back room. We're getting ready. We're going to do a countdown. We're going to get Aubrey to count us down from 5 on, and we're going to be live. You guys all ready? So.
All right, here we go.
All right, here we go.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar, Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce, and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on Twitter at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, and our distinguished guests your questions using hashtag Disrupt, and we'll do our best to answer them live. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO and founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Disrupting Digital Business. He's a regular contributor to Harvard Business Review and ZDNet. And in my humble opinion, one of the top futurists to follow on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm here with my awesome co-host, Vala Afshar. He's the #1 follower you can follow in terms of being our CMOs, CIOs, and CEOs looking for business advice, insights. More importantly, he's on business television, an author himself. And more importantly, here to interview our first guest. So who do we have today? Or do we need any intros?
We don't need any intros, but I'm so proud because I've reduced Tom's bio to just a half a page. So bear with me, please, for the next minute. Tom Peters is the co-author of In Search of Excellence, the book that changed the way the world does business and often tagged as the best business book ever. Tom is the author of 18 books that sold more than 10 million copies around the world. His most recent effort is The Excellence Dividend, which was my highest book recommendation of 2018. And let's hear what others have said about Tom and his 18 books. The New Yorker, in no small measure, American corporations have become what Peters encouraged them to be. Fortune magazine, we live in Tom Peters' world. CNN, while most business gurus milk the same mantra for all it's worth, the one-man brand called Tom Peters is still reinventing himself. Tom received the Thinkers 50 Lifetime Achievement Award. This recognition celebrates the fact that Tom has delivered over 2,500 keynotes to over 5 million, that's million, people around 67 countries and all 50 states. Along the way, that means he's traveled nearly 8,000 flights covering 5 million miles. His life's work is about educating and inspiring current and future business leaders by delivering a masterclass on humanity and how you can live a recommendable life. All of Tom's written speech material covering the last 15 plus years is available to download for free. Talk about generosity at tompeters.com and excellencenow.com. In addition, Tom has tweeted over 112,400 times. Talk about commitment and being accessible and reachable. He's the reason why I am on Twitter. He's also my highest recommendation follow on Twitter at Tom_Peters. Welcome, Tom, to Disrupt TV.
Holy smokes. That's a real mouthful. I am thrilled to be here with you. I incredibly enjoyed our time about a year or so ago in the Boston studio. And now I am particularly excited to be here because, and maybe this sounds arrogant, the stuff that I have cared about without a break for the last 43 years, suddenly in the world of COVID-19, the protests and so on, is actually more important than it has been before.
You know, Tom, you're right. In some ways,
it's really ridiculous. You know, I said to somebody, I've got all these degrees, business degrees, engineering degrees from Stanford and Cornell. But if you want to understand my message, the educational certificate that you need is a signed graduation certificate from the 4th grade. I mean, there's, you know, and it's really the case. It's a perfect example because I remember my 4th grade teacher from Annapolis, Maryland, and the way that she paid attention to us. And obviously, even though it was the olden days and she slapped us with rulers, she clearly loved every single one of us. And that's not an exaggeration. And it is maybe it was from her whom I learned. I don't know. But the magic today is people who give a damn about people. And we can talk about various bits and pieces of it, not least of which is, assuming we get back to employing people, which it looks today like maybe that's the case, never, ever, 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 ever hire any living human being for any job who does not have a high EQ, and do not ever, 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 ever promote anybody to any position who does not have a sky high EQ. And you know, thinking of you guys and Salesforce and so on as a tech company, if you say, I really only want people with high EQs, it does not mean that you're passing on shockingly talented tech people. You know, there's a guy by the name of Peter Miller who runs a biotech company called Optinos. And his one-liner, which I used, was, we only hire nice people. And he said, some of the degrees required to work for me, you know, you can't even pronounce the name of the degree. But he said, guess what? There are a whole lot of people actually in the world who have an advanced microbiology degree. Don't hire the jerks.
Great.
No, it's a great point. And, you know, when we think about what's been going on here, like in some ways, 1965 to 1970 have all passed in a few weeks. We're back in space. We've got social unrest. It's a bit chaotic. Leaders have no idea what to expect. I mean, what should we start with?
Well, the three of us were talking about this a little bit before we went on air. We should start with honesty and humility. And honesty and humility, in part, let's make all three of us leaders of some size, well, not a sizable institution, an institution of 6 or 600. I don't care. The opening words are, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Let's experiment and move forward. Because no living human being today does know what they're doing. And humility is incredibly important. God, I don't know what the heck to say. It's be human, care about people. I don't get people who don't care about people. And unfortunately, in these last couple of months, we've seen a whole lot of people who were, look, I totally, absolutely weep for the 20-person restaurant, 20-table restaurant owner, and his business is dried up, and he totally has to pay attention to the financials and so on. But in the 2006 crash, there's someone I work with, a woman who is CEO of a middle-sized company. And for the first time in their 30-year history, they had to lay people off. And I remember talking to somebody about, Christine is her first name, Christine laying people off. And they said she was so emotional, so gentle, so caring that by the end of the interview, she was in tears and the person who had just been laid off was hugging her and saying, "It's going to be okay, Christine." That's the person I want running my accounting department or training department or factory or restaurant or whatever it is, being human. I want to read you guys something in a couple minutes, and you can tell me when I can do it. Can I take a couple minutes?
Oh, jump in now.
Please.
Okay. This came across, I don't remember if it was started in Twitter or not. There is a community college in Boardman, Oregon called Blue Mountain Community College. And about a month ago or 6 weeks ago, they sent a memo around to all of their employees who were now working at home. And it had 6 points on it, very short. I'm going to read them very quickly. 1, you are not, quote, working from home, unquote. You are at your home during a crisis trying to work. 2, your personal physical, mental, and emotional health is extremely important right now. Take care of yourself. 3, you should not try to compensate for lost productivity by working longer hours. 4, be kind to yourself and don't judge how you are coping based on how you see others coping. 5, be kind to others and don't judge others in how they are coping based on how you are coping. 6, success will not be measured the same way it was when things are normal. And I just, it's beautiful. It's pure art.
Yeah.
Shakespeare couldn't have done as well, but it's that attitude.
Yeah, it's absolute. By the way, Ray, can I just say we could just sit here and have Tom read to us, and I would be completely fulfilled for the entire segment. That was beautiful.
Well, listen, now that you've said that, Val, I'm going to do one more thing, which isn't reading. Okay. And
I loved it.
This is something like 36 hours ago. I am indeed near New Bedford, Massachusetts. Textile capital, whale oil capital, has come upon some hard times in the last number of decades, even though it's in the midst of recovering nicely, which may or may not be stopped by this, drug problems and so on. So let me tell you what the local newspaper said about our New Bedford, town of 90,000, not peanuts, New Bedford police chief 48 hours ago. There were protesters. He goes out to where the protesters are. He's got his cop uniform on, but no Star Wars crap with flak vests and all that sort of thing. Goes out to where the protesters are. First thing he does is get down on his knee. Second thing he does is say, these protests make incredible sense. What happened in Minnesota is absolutely contemptible and disgusting. I am here to support you. The next thing he does is he marches with the protesters for a while. And he's talking to a protester, and this is the part that's unreal. He said, look, I've done my best at selecting my police officers, but upon occasion, they may do something that goes a little bit over the line. He said, if you see any of my officers doing something, going over the line, get a hold of me immediately and talk to me immediately. He said, I'm not beloved by all of my cops because our standard for civil behavior is just over the roof. I mean, good Lord. And I mean, the problem, and we've already alluded to it, is it's a wonderful thing and a wonderful disposition, but it's not rocket science. It does not require either of my Cornell engineering degrees or either of my Stanford business degrees. It requires having had a good mom and a good fourth grade teacher and a bunch of stuff like that. And
It's
I mean,
a great
gosh,
point. But how do you train for
really-
EQ? Like, can you train for EQ? Like, we can see it. We have it there. Can we train people to have better EQ?
I'm not sure I'm going to use that word, Ray, but we'll wobble around it. First, I should hire for it. Let's get that out of the way. I think if we have an institution which is really thoughtful, caring, and people first, I think a lot of lower EQ people will come around. And maybe we can help them a little bit with some training programs. I mean, maybe one of the things, and thinking about you guys and tech, maybe we can hook some of these people, if they're techie-like, on hard-nosed psychological and social psychological research. It's just out there. There's hard-nosed, good as anything that's ever come out of a pharmacy lab, hard-nosed research that says positive reinforcement is 30 times more powerful than negative reinforcement. Maybe we can sell that as a quant thing. Incidentally, I've got to take another one of those 2-second breaks. Vala, you said nice things about the excellence dividend, but frankly, I'm totally pissed off that I didn't find an article until after the book was out that I would love to have had. It's an article that is titled Google's Big Surprise. And Google did a study of their top employees. And what they discovered was the top 7 attributes of the top Google employees were all soft stuff. Listen, respect, and a whole bunch of stuff like that. Then they looked at their most innovative teams. And if I understand the deal, Google does one of those things that I think is purely disgusting, and you are classified as an A player or a B player, which is a brilliant way to demotivate forever 50% of your employees. At any rate, on the team thing, the B teams wildly out-innovated the A teams. And for the same reason, 7 soft factors like listening, paying attention. I mean, I'm a 30-year Silicon Valley person and went to Stanford, so I'm allowed to say rude things. I have this image in my mind of the Stanford 2018 computer science grad with an IQ of 642, well aware of the fact that he is the smartest human being that God has not put on earth, but in the entire effing universe. He's not a particularly good listener. You got to be down around whatever to have that happen. But yeah, exactly. But I mean, it's just fabulous. And the soft factors won, and they won at Google. I don't know whether Google's done anything about it since then, but I mean, I particularly love that because it doesn't allow techies any place to hide. And I'm not going to get off on my other things like how disgusted I am with the book Brotopia about Silicon Valley, which I hope you guys didn't read because you can only read it if you have a barf bag.
You were in Silicon Valley and Stanford for a while. Like, how did you lose your passive aggressiveness? I'm just kidding. I get branded as being aggressive and direct.
Let me tell you my Stanford secret. My PhD thesis advisor, son of an Albany cop, graduated from SUNY Albany at the age of 18, got his PhD in psychological statistics from the University of Chicago at the age of 21. I mean, holy shit. Wow. That's not a little pissant school like Stanford. That's Chicago. And, so, it was a wonderful exercise in humility. My problem, Ray, to try and answer your question, is I'm not talking about complicated stuff. And the part that I love because of that MBA is long term. If you take care of people and do those soft things, you make a lot of money. There was a study done that was reported by McKinsey, and the worst thing that's happened in the United States of America is when Milton Friedman invented shareholder value maximization. That was the kiss of death, fundamentally. At any rate, this big McKinsey study, huge McKinsey study, looked at the long-term investing companies versus the short-term investing companies. And the short-termers, over a 20-year period, just destroyed the long-termers. Really, I think I said it back. The long-termers totally destroyed the short-termers in terms of financial returns, jobs created, and every other darn thing. There's, if I was Dante, I would create a 10th ring in hell for Friedman. I'm not going to say what I'm about to say. I might throw Zuckerberg in there with him just for the hell of it.
Well, let's we
have Facebook.
we might. I want to make an observation before I ask the question, and that is, you can see how the greatest teachers are lifelong students. And I would love to have had the opportunity to watch you climb that ladder behind you to get to the books to the top shelf. It's just amazing to see you're surrounded by all these books, but you spend so much time and energy teaching others, including myself and Ray, every day on social platforms, and we thank you for that. So that's my comment. I love the ladder. I love to see you climbing it and getting to those top books. But I want to talk about something that I haven't experienced in my adult or in my lifetime. And we talked about this at the beginning. So there is a health crisis. Today we crossed 110,000 deaths in the U.S. Yeah. That's tens of millions of families that have lost loved ones. So there's a failure for us to protect our citizens, and we can talk about that separately, but there's a crisis there and it's ongoing. There's an economic crisis. Some good news today, but there's still 40 million people that filed for unemployment. That number means that every one of us on this call knows someone personally who lost a job. It's just not a number anymore. It's affecting us emotionally, psychologically, because we have friends and family that have lost jobs. There's an environmental crisis in that we're going to have to feed 2 billion plus people by end of this decade, 10 billion from 7.7. So the wars of the future may be over water and food. And there's these mega cities defined by 10 million or more that will be 50 plus by the end of this decade. So the environmental piece is still top of mind. There's a race crisis. We saw a murder on video. And, frankly, I'm ashamed of it. And I, as an immigrant refugee, I know this country is better. I know the people are better. But it's just shameful what we saw. And then the last thing is there's a global leadership crisis, meaning we are witnessing divisiveness. We're witnessing dishonesty, uninformed decision-making process, irrelevant content, and at the highest levels. So the combination of these crises leads to a trust deficit. And if I use Rachel Botsman's definition of trust, who authored the book, Who Do We Trust? And she said trust is competence plus character. And she said competence is reliability plus capability, the hard stuff. And character is integrity plus benevolence, your motivation and intention for why you do what you do, the soft stuff. Given the crisis deficit, given the hard stuff is easy and soft stuff is hard, what advice do you have to young entrepreneurs who are minority, women, Black, immigrants, in terms of helping heal our nation and trying to figure out how we can address this trust deficit that we're all hurting from?
Well, and some people have commented on this relative, particularly, let's take the color thing, and in particular African Americans. I assure you that I am not going to be the white guy on this show giving advice relative to African Americans. I'm part of the problem more than I am the solution. So we'll, put that one aside. I happen to be working in Washington at the Pentagon in 1968 when we had the Martin Luther King Jr. assassination and riots. I've been through this before. Anybody who would give you a 3-sentence answer to that question ought to be taken out to the backyard and whipped.
You're the best. You really are. Well, you're the radical transparency and the wisdom you have is second to none. You're right. I don't have the answer to that question.
Yeah. Well,
I was hoping you would, but you know, my unrealistic expectations. Yeah.
Unfortunately, Vala,
Oh man.
you just did that laundry list, and Ray and I are going to go outside after this and shoot ourselves.
Yeah,
My wife's going to be irritated about that, or at least I hope she will be.
Maybe one answer is vote in November.
Brilliant. Bingo. Absolutely, positively.
But it's not just we're looking for those answers, right? We're looking for people to be a bit more patient, people to be a little bit more passionate, right? People to be a little bit more open-minded, to listen, to have those dialogues. We haven't had a chance to have a breather. I mean, we've gone from one crisis after the other in such a short period of time. I think the aliens are testing us. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, something is going on, you know. It's something is off. That's all I can say.
The only thing that I don't know whether it makes children like the two of you feel better or not, but the King riots were 68, and amazingly enough, I don't remember when Kent State was, but Kent State was kind of like Lafayette Square. It was soldiers shooting kids. We went through 20 consecutive years of shit. We went through race stuff, and then by the time that was alleviated a teeny bit, we went through Vietnam. So we do have some history of surviving these things. I mean, I know what you guys have to help me. I know what part of my answer is, but I'm not entirely happy with it. In the context of what each of the three of us does in the course of a given day, first at some level, be thoughtful, care, take care of your family, take care of your 82-year-old grandmother who lives across the road, take care of the close community stuff, and don't let anybody, if you are lucky enough to be employed, don't let anybody bully you into not taking all the time you need. I do want to say one thing to all of our leaders who are listening, and this is a very rude remark, albeit not with rude language. Ms. or women will do all this stuff better. Mr. Leader, what you have done in the last 2 months and what you will do in the next 2 months will define who you are as an adult human being. And remember that. How you behave, the degree to which you were helpful, the degree to which you were thoughtful. This is you. This is the moment. It ain't coming twice in that regard. And I feel so very strongly about that. I'm 77, and I said I only have one judgment for my life. Can I walk past a mirror without barfing? And there's a wonderful column written by New York Times columnist David Brooks, and he said there are two kinds of virtues: resume virtues and eulogy virtues. The resume virtues are graduated from Stanford, promoted 4 times by the age of 29, net worth of XXXXX. The eulogy virtues are obviously what people say about you at the funeral. And what they say about you at the funeral are, in a word, how did he, she treat people? I just said something that popped out of my mouth in the middle of that statement that I want to come back to. Admittedly, the sample is small, but nations led by women have done better with COVID than the boy nations.
Yes.
And one of my strongest beliefs, and I'm going to leave the racial aside for a minute, one of my strongest beliefs is more women CEOs. There was that famous Melinda Gates quote about there are more CEOs in the Fortune 500 named James than there are women. Yes. And, that's just a disgrace. I made a comment on Twitter, Vala. There's no reason you would have necessarily been following it. And it was after something went wacko at a hospital. And I said, here is the law that I'm going to ask Congress to pass. No more male hospital CEOs ever. And, I mean, the fact of the matter is, and, there are central tendencies, and there are guys that listen and there are women that don't listen. But the human attributes, women tend to be better at it than we boys are.
Yes.
And I really, really so desperately want to see the number of senior women just go up and go through the roof. It's better than it was at some level, but a long. I mean, here's hard science, which is fascinating. We say women are more people oriented. Well, guess when that starts? Well, from a measurable standpoint, 3 days. There was this fabulous neurobiological research that was done. And by day 3 after birth, girl babies are making 5 times more eye contact than boy babies. And all these variables we've talked about, aren't they de facto eye contact variables?
Absolutely.
Getting inside and paying attention to you.
I want to follow up the comments you're making. First, I want our listeners to go to tompeters.com and read what I call the most beautiful manifesto titled Content, the 27 Number Ones. Please take time and read and reread until you've memorized the manifesto. But in the manifesto, Tom actually calls this out, number 14 in the manifesto, and it's not in any particular order, could be number 1. Leadership teams must, quotation around must, put women in charge. Now, in the manifesto, it reads, Business Week, as leaders, women rule. The new study found that female managers outshine their manager counterparts on almost every measure. Harvard Business Review cites women are rated higher in fully 12 of the 16 competencies that go in outstanding leadership. So there's science behind this. But here's my question, and you referenced Melinda Gates. Melinda Gates cited a World Economic Forum study that said it will take 200 years for pay parity, where women are paid the same as men for the same work. 200 years. So unfortunately, none of us three are going to witness pay parity. So why are women not paid the same as men for equal work? Common sense. What is the cultural, what is your parents, your school teachers, your early managers in your career? What has led to this acceptance that we don't pay for the same work?
Vala, my daughter's going to. I'm just kidding. Your daughter and my daughter are going to. Come on.
I have 2 daughters. But, I don't want to use the excuse of I'm a father of 2 daughters. I mean, it just doesn't.
Well, one thing, which is not an answer, but it is that exactly 60 days from now, we will celebrate the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote.
That's right.
The passage of the 19th Amendment, which was August the 18th, 1920.
That's right.
And that's a disgrace that happened so late.
And at that time, it didn't include black women voters.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it was
an
income.
There were a couple of other qualifiers too, Val. I'm not.
Yeah.
Of property ownership, land, the usual stuff. I mean, it wasn't true universal suffrage. So
the only, this is a stupid statement to call it good news, because I think men are not all awful, almost all of it, but not all of us. The women share of graduates in the U.S. has gone through the roof.
Yeah.
Little
Same with
signs
medical
of
school.
project
Same with
of
medical
progress.
school.
Yeah.
I am a Cornell civil engineer, class of 1965, which means I matriculated in 1960. I got my quarterly Cornell Engineering magazine 6 or 8 months ago, 2 women on the cover. One of the women, my age, was the only woman out of 800 matriculants in my class who was a woman. Wow. 1 for 800.
Wow. The
wonderfully youthful face on the other side of the cover was a young woman who is class of 2022, and the entering class of Cornell, which is a damn good engineering school, the entering class of Cornell Engineering School, 51% women.
Wow. Bravo. Bravo.
Wow.
Awesome.
That's a
I
big
literally teared up. And you see the books behind me. If I did a 180 flip with my screen, you would see that I tore off the cover of my Cornell Engineering magazine and put it on the wall. I want to do one other.
We're running out of time, Tom, and I wanted to thank. Oh, go ahead.
Go please.
No, I just want to tell one tiny little people story. We are, what's today, the 5th or the 6th?
5th.
Tomorrow is the 76th anniversary of the D-Day landing. On the 5th of June, 1944, the commander of British troops, Field Marshal Montgomery, it is said, gave one of the most roaring, incredible speeches to his officer corps, never to be matched. The same night, the commander of the entire alliance, Dwight David Eisenhower, I'm sorry, I can't tell this straight, guys. Dwight David Eisenhower, with his little jacket with no medals, went down to the beach, put his arm around soldiers, walked up and down the beach, and wished them Godspeed. Now, that's not even the punchline. This was reported in a book, I think, by Michael Korda. Somebody got a hold of a diary, and it was describing Eisenhower, and it said Eisenhower's identity with his soldiers were such that parents were willing to send their boys to die for him. And
they were willing to die for Ike.
You can't, none of the three of us can beat Eisenhower. But isn't that exactly what we have talked about since the minute that the camera went on in some form or other? One guy gives a speech and the other guy puts his arm around you. And, you know, the guy who put his arm around you, yes, he is a 4-star general who graduated from West Point. And they said, incidentally, when Eisenhower was at West Point, there's a magazine, it may not even exist, called Armchair General, that his secret was he made a lot of friends at West Point. And his life success was as a coalition commander. You know, Patton did his Patton thing, and Eisenhower held the whole world together, the coalition together, kept the Brits and the French and the Americans, as I like to say, he kept the Americans and the Brits from killing each other before they had time to go across the channel and start going after Germans. But Eisenhower, I mean, I was, born in Maryland, and I can't give all the credit for Eisenhower to having been born in the Midwest, but that's Midwest for you. I love that wonderful one-liner. What is Chicago? New York without the attitude. And the thing about it is, it's kind of true. But
a lot of good
you
values
talked about
across
all
the country.
The grand problems, and every single word you said was true. But let's behave well as individuals, starting now.
Yeah.
And let's hold ourselves to a just incredible standard of thoughtfulness. And we can't make poverty go away. We can't make racial discrimination go away. But if we're kind, I think it's, oh my God, Henry James or William James. William James has one of the best quotes ever. There are three things that are important in human life. The first one is to be kind. The second one is to be kind. And the third one is to be kind. And my goal, Vala and Ray, is I want that to be the business school and engineering school and law school motto. The professional schools, and I've got 4 degrees from 2 of them, stink. And they stink, including my alma mater, Stanford, and they stink, including my alma mater, Cornell, both of which have done amazing things for me. But I was teaching a class in New Zealand to a bunch of Chinese kids who were transitioning from a tech education into becoming a project manager. And the thing about it, take those kids, if you're talented and graduate with that engineering degree, you're only going to be a line worker for the first 36 months. And at the end of 24, 36, or maybe 12 months, you're going to become a project manager. And suddenly the entire focus of your life is helping people.
Right.
And it doesn't make a damn bit of difference whether you can write a jillion lines of code or 2 lines of code. I was a damn good coder in my early days.
We are here with Tom Peters, author of The Search of Excellence. His words, be kind. Follow him on Twitter at Tom_Peters. Tom is our keynote speaker at Constellation Connected Enterprise 2020. We intend on having the event, Tom. We'll figure out how you want to get there. And, thank you for sharing your wisdom, your words. Any last thoughts, Vala?
Can we do this every week? It was so good. It was. I'm telling you, masterclass on humanity. Masterclass in humanity.
It takes 3 to tango. We did this before. We're doing it now, and this is a conversation among 3 colleagues who we all actually care a hell of a lot about each other. And I didn't come on this for your audience. I came on this to see you 2 guys.
I'm humbled by your words.
We are so humbled. Thank you very much. Once again, Tom Peters, and thank you so much for being here. So happy Friday.
You, sir.
Thanks for the invitation. Thank you.
Ray, I'm a better person because of that last interview, and I'm going to be even a better person with our next interview. Yeah, good luck, Michael. Follow Tom Peters.
Tell me about that.
That's right. Why would you do that to anyone? But if there's anyone that can hit a grand slam in the bottom of the 9th, it's Michael.
It is Michael.
It is our privilege.
He's faced bigger adversity than this in his past.
He has. Hi, Michael. We want you to follow one of the living icons of the business world. But Michael J Sikorsky, CEO and co-founder of Robots and Pencil, has done remarkable and seemingly impossible things throughout his career. In 2009, he co-founded Robots and Pencils. In fact, he's the robot in the Robots and Pencils, with the contrarian view that mobile would be more transformative than the internet. And we've learned a lesson 11 years after the fact what Michael knew. His company, listen to this number, Ray, redunculous. His company grew by 4,800% in the first 5 years, being named the 34th fastest growing company in North America, Canada, US combined. Robots and Pencils has become a trusted partner to some of the world's most innovative companies. We have over 250 apps with nearly 80 million users. Just stunning. He was named 50 most influential people in Canada. If Tom Peters lived in Canada, he may have been bumped to 51. He guest lectures at Harvard Business, at MIT, at the World Economic Forum. So the biggest brains in the world want to hear what Michael has to say. Ernest Young named him the Entrepreneur of the Year. And he's another amazing follow because he's so active on Twitter and listening, learning, and helping us I'm going to read, it's MJSIKORSKY. Welcome, Michael, to DisrupTV.
Oh, thank you for having me so much, and thanks for setting me up after Tom Peters. Really appreciate that.
We're never gonna live this one down.
The next time we have the Pope as a guest, we're gonna have you come.
Yeah, that's right. Don't worry about that. The Pontiff and then Sikorsky. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. It'll be amazing. He'll be holier than a man.
That was a great interview. It was a pleasure to watch it. It was awesome hearing you guys. I'll talk with Tom.
Thank you, sir.
Well, hey, you've been talking about something really hot, and this is so important because people don't understand the level of sophistication, the level of automation that is about to happen. And this notion of permissionless organizations is something that blows people's minds because today the interactions are in front of you. The interactions are physical. The interactions are there, right? And we're about to make that shift where it goes from human-led to, what just happened? Right? So let's talk about permissionless organizations.
Yeah, no, Troy, thanks for the setup there. I think it's so cool because AIs don't ask for permission, right? And then I also think that the next generation of talent aren't ready to ask for permission either. right? And so from our perspective, we think kind of, if you think we're in the fourth industrial revolution, and then Ray, I'm pretty sure it's in your book, you talked about how first you have the technology that comes to disrupt, but then you have to disrupt inside your business model. I argue that underneath that, you have to disrupt in your organizational design, right? And so I think, I think in permissionless organizations, we're thinking about whole new ways of organizational design.
So let's expand on that. There are trailblazer leaders like yourself that believe that the org design is the competitive advantage, and how you adopt a beginner's mindset, how you have ability to build an organization that's structured for movement in order to achieve optimal speed. If you watch elite 4x100 athletes compete, the first leg of the race is typically 1 to 1.5 seconds longer than the other 3 legs, because the runner starts at rest, whereas the other 3 are in motion before a baton is handed to them. And in the elite running world, 1.5 second delay is about 10, 11 meter distance. It's first place to 100th place difference. So positioning your organization and building it for movement is how you achieve optimal speed. Can you talk about org structure that allows you to stay relevant and agile and adaptive, and ultimately able to co-create value at the speed of need? One of the things I noticed with robots and pencils, other than the fact you hire some of the goddamn best, smartest people in not just mobile development, but just design thinking, and they understand business and finance, and there's such a well-versed group, is that you're able to create beautiful things that allow for optimal movement and speed in companies. How does the org structure impact that?
Yeah, so one, I think there's 3 KPIs in a permissionless organization. And so the first is speed of decisions, which is really trust, right? If you go back to Tom, it's all trust, right? And then the second KPI is judgment, because what you're really saying is all the talent that work there, you want to grow their judgment. In fact, if people said to me, what's the secret KPI inside robots and pencils? It's the speed at which we grow the talent's judgment. And then the third KPI, I think, is measuring entrepreneurial thinking. And the way that we kind of execute that inside our org design is to think about this concept of snow melts from the edges, which is a sentence from Andy Grove. So how do you push as much of the decision rights to the edge of the organization? And then how do you follow that talent that will lead you there? And then if you take the trend line of exponential technology, how could anyone top-down plan this? So you can't even have this org as machine in the 1900s to org as organism today as well, right? And so I think it's actually the most natural way to do it, because I also think humans are poor substitutes for robots. And as we shift from the 3rd industrial revolution to the 4th industrial revolution, we want humans to be even more uniquely human, right? More than fill like a BPO or job function role.
I'm going to just follow up on that. Andy Grove also said a healthy dose of not uncertainty,
paranoia.
Yeah, paranoia. A healthy dose of paranoia is a good thing. So how do you, again, CEO of a company that grew by 5,000% in 5 years, how did you ensure there was sense of urgency at all levels, including the edge of robots and pencils? How do you cultivate that? And by the way, I think it's a superpower to have paranoia and be at peace of mind at the same time. I think is a superpower. So how did you do that?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I think the credit really goes with the talent. If you think about it, if you say you're going to build an org, the way that I thought about it from the very beginning was, I want to be a racetrack designer. I don't want to build a racetrack for Ferraris. And the talent that I want to bring into our house are Ferraris. And I want to be the first org or the first racetrack that lets them get out of first gear. Because if you look in the typical corporate architecture, everyone's getting gate kept or stage gate everywhere. So first gear, they finally get going and they can't shift down. So I think it's actually this recognition that the talent is actually going to lead you into the future rather than you're going to lead yourself into the future. And so, just to point out a moment of, humility, I would never want to work for the 20-year-old version of myself, because the 20-year-old version of myself that started a company, I kind of designed it top down like I was the key person, right? Like everything should route through me. And by the time I started Robots and Pencils, I realized, well, actually all the answers are in the talent. So how do you lay down infrastructure such that the talent can lead you to the future and you as management or the racetrack designers can get out of the way?
That's
Wow.
a very, very important point,
Wow.
right? When we think about war and war design, right? What Napoleon did versus everyone else was speed up the decision chain. And the ability to move faster on the decisions allow him to win his wars, right? Now, when we take that to the AI example, and I'm going to steal this from my friend Snehal Antani, if he's listened to it, he's got a new startup. I mean, this view of really competing on decisions per second becomes important in the world of AI, right? You're seeing it right now when we speak. We are being crushed by all these bots in social media that are basically trying to manipulate our thinking, and we're responding with humans who are asking for permission to go solve this. Who do you think's going to win? Right? We got a very unfair advantage, right? Anytime you got like people making 1,000, bots making 1,000 decisions per second and humans making one every minute, that's an unfair war. So
I think it's a total unfair war, but I think the one thing that I think gives a human an edge, just because I'll be Tom Peters and pro humanity, is that we can make very few decisions.
We're all voting for the humans,
right? Yeah, totally. We can make very few decisions, but if they're really clear ones, then they actually can help the AI run rampant, right? So sometimes I think again, it's about this: you set up the infrastructure, you set up the sandbox, and then you want to let people just raise. Yep. Just like how the AIs want us for permission, as much as I don't want our talent asking for all this permission. And I think that the one of the tricks is deciding what's a one-way door and what's a two-way door. And then two-way doors, who cares? You can back up, just go like crazy, decide. One-way doors are really hard to come back on. Well, then maybe you slow it down.
That's a great point on velocity and velocity of decision making, things that you can't take back. You want to go a little bit more precise, more slow, more thoughtful. But you're talking about, I mean, we're talking about generations of people that remember having to ask for permission instead of beg for forgiveness. How do you change that culturally?
Oh man, that's a brilliant question, Ray. So I have a favorite quote from Charlie Munger, which is that if you didn't destroy one of your best loved ideas each year, it's probably a wasted year. So I think this is like that idea is one to just get destroyed. And then the thing that I've learned the most is it's like a 6 to 9 month gestation period where for people actually start realizing it's actually safe here to do what the org design was set up to do. So the people who join from the outside actually first play it like any other typical org, and then they keep watching that actually it's okay, that's not a typical org. And so I find it 6 to 9 months of just being in the house and recognizing what we say is what we mean.
We've heard you in your talks reference Bill Joy's law. No matter who you are, most of the smartest people work for someone else. So you're one of the most successful entrepreneurs we've had on our show. And so how do you maintain that beginner's mindset, the level of humility that's required to think like a Tom Peters who still has a ladder climbing shelves to read books? How do you stay teachable, especially when you've had the success you've had? Because you've been on a rocket ship for decades. And so I could assume, I can only assume because I haven't had your rocket ship experience, that at some time you must feel invincible, or like you're the smartest person in the room, or, the smartest people are here with me. So how do you keep yourself grounded so you can, change, and you can learn, unlearn, relearn, and change yourself, which again, I think is a superpower.
Wow. So for me, I think that I recognize that I'm always surrounded by smarter people wherever I go. So I'm reminded all the time of my humility. And then I think that the other part is having a growth mindset from Carol Dweck from Stanford. And so this idea, in fact, I always think about if I can be the smallest fish in the biggest pond, it means I get the maximum growth trajectory. I have the maximum space to grow. So I always want to construct an environment of which I actually have the most to grow. And so if you just keep kind of constructing your environment, it forces you, or you can actually, construct an environment where actually you're the really big fish in a really small pond and you have nowhere else to go. So to me, it's environment construction.
Are you writing a book? Are you thinking about writing a book? I mean, your answers are ridiculously rich. Really.
I'm looking for co-authors. There you go. Yeah, you guys.
I don't know which direction you're looking at. No, happy to help if you want to do anything. It's no, it's definitely. I mean, I think you got something here. Permissionless organizations. I think there's a piece. I think we got a comment here talking about AI ethics. Let me find who wrote that. I think.
Ethical use of technology. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
it's
very important.
It's going to challenge society and businesses, I believe, for many, many decades, because as Ray said, if you have machine learning algorithms that can make decisions on 2,000-3,000 vectors simultaneously, whereas us, even the smartest folks in the room, maybe 4 or 5 dimensions simultaneously, it's, to reverse engineer how we get to logic and not be able to do so because it's a deep neural network and the logic there to help you reverse engineer just isn't there. And even going through the process of reverse engineering, you're dumbifying the algorithm to be at human level, which means you're not optimizing the power of AI. What is your advice as someone who's building AI-powered mobile applications in terms of understanding, should this be made, the ethical use of the software, and will it serve betterment of society? And how do you guide that as a CEO?
Yeah, I think it's tough, and I think it's a beautiful question. I kind of believe in the procrastination principle a little bit. In fact, until we kind of iterate, we don't know what we found. So sometimes I actually believe you have to iterate a bit so then you can come at it. And I'm a big proponent of XAI, which is explainable AI. So you do all this extra work so you can have some insight into the box. But you're right, on some of that stuff, it's hard to get that the XAI, right? And so I think that you have to procrastinate a little bit on the answer, because then you can actually then tame the beast of which that's been created.
That's very good
back
point.
to your point about lanes, one way and two way, right? Think about it. Once we have the transparency, you get the XAI and the explainability, then it's about where do we reverse things that we learned that were wrong, right? Because that's also very hard to unlearn too in these systems, and building the design for that. So people worry about that. So that's pretty crazy.
There's actually all these. Oh, sorry, Val. I was just saying there's all these attention techniques to say inside my network, I want you to unlearn, right? So there actually is all these advanced techniques to say, actually, I think you've overlearned, and I want you to actually reduce your attention. Yeah. And so I think it's tough, though. I think it's tough.
Yeah, or like supply stock pre-March, who would have thought that these items were more useful? RVs, bikes, toilet paper, hair dye. Yeah, nobody ever orders this much of that stuff,
I am sure supply chain models are being rewritten as we speak, for sure. And given the fact that have different dimensions in terms of how you spend your discretionary income. Some is based on access, going to a movie or a hotel, you just didn't have access. Now, safety is now a criteria, relevance. So you have different layers of how you process and you decide where you spend your money, which is impacting customer experience, which is growing e-commerce, contactless payments, drones, autonomous vehicles. So incredible acceleration of certain technologies as a result of what we've witnessed in the last 3-4 months. You're right. No algorithm, Ray, would have had these considerations in 2019. You're absolutely right. My final question to you, Michael. Advice to, so we had the co-founder of Square on the show, Jim McKelvey, and one of the biggest takeaways in our interview with him was that he said they didn't know what they were doing. Like him and Jack, they were not, fintech finance experts. As an artist in St. Louis, he wasn't able to sell a 2,000 piece of art. So that led to, we need to fix this. People need to be able to transact. So his advice was, don't disqualify yourself when it comes to tackling unsolved problems. By definition, if the problem is unsolved, it means there are no experts. It means you don't have experience. And he felt many entrepreneurs who are looking to build robots and pencils success stories sometimes lose to imposter syndrome and lose to self-doubt because they feel that their expertise and experience isn't quite there, even though they're going after unsolved problems. And I thought that was brilliant advice. So any advice you have to entrepreneurs who may be the 20-year-old version of you or the 30, who may not have the experience you have now, but are motivated to go and, as Steve Jobs said, put a dent in the universe. What advice do you have for these folks?
Love it. I'll give you a couple points. One was when I started my first company, I had an entrepreneurial seizure, which means it wasn't well thought out. I had no idea what I was going to do.
That is a startup.
That was my startup or whatever, right? And think about it. There's no permission there. No one stopped you. In fact, I drove to the corporate registry, and for $400, I had a company, and I had no idea how to even answer the questions of which the registry lady was asking me.
Wow.
I just said, well, what does someone else say? I'm like, I'll do what that person says. And they're like, did you bring your checkbook? I'm like, no, you're going to need to go do that at the bank. So I think this whole permission to start your company is you don't need it at all. And I think there's a couple of things that I've learned is one is demographics are destiny. And so if you can tie yourself into a wave, everything will be a lot easier. Another one, and this is a Warren Buffett one, but there's 3 boxes. So one of the things I did when I was a young entrepreneur, because I was an engineer, hard problems, I felt like I was attracted to them. And when I think through a business lens, there's in, out, and too hard. And if the problems look like just too hard, I just put in the too hard box, come back to them later or whatever. And then probably just 2 more quick things. One is maximizing evidence that you learn per dollar, right? You're back to speed of decisions. So how much evidence you get per dollar. And then I'll just end on, if you're executing your startup, you're lucky enough that some people will follow you, right? And they're really picking the leader. And so there's a beautiful quote from Cicero, which is gratitude is not only the greatest of all virtues, but the parent of all others. So I think about that all the time. I have to be maximally grateful for the opportunity to pursue the business, for the opportunity for people who will come along on the ride with me. And there you go.
Michael, you can follow Tom Peters anytime.
I'm not following after you, Michael. I'm never following after you. That's the way we're gonna look at this one.
That's why we didn't have a third guest. We always have 3 guests, but we figured after Tom and after you, it would just be a disservice to anybody.
You guys are kind.
Oh, good time back. We are here with Michael J Sikorsky, CEO and co-founder at Robots and Pencils. You can follow on Twitter at MJ Sikorsky. Are you related to the aircraft company?
Apparently it's a great uncle.
It's a great uncle. All right. One of the top innovators, top growing companies, top startups in North America, but more importantly, awesome dude, awesome team. We know so many customers of yours and clients.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Happy Friday.
Michael, you're amazing. Thanks.
Stick around if you want to be on the green room. We're going to do some credits and we'll jump in from there. All right, Vala. I can't say that.
I think you can say that. It was, holy smokes. This is why Fridays is our favorite time to get together, because that was an entrepreneurship masterclass and a humanity masterclass. Actually, both were humanity masterclass, and you and I and our audience are better for it. That was just simply amazing. I'm at a loss for words, but let me just explain who's on next week.
Episode 194.
Yeah. I think we're about a dozen away from 600 interviews in 4 years. So I'm really proud of the work you and I have done. Hopefully, it's adding value to our audience. Next week, we have Brian Solis, who I think all of you know, Global Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce. He's a good friend of.
I don't know if everybody knows he's at Salesforce. So this is debut for.
Yeah, so we'll definitely get a sense of what the last 60 days has been for Brian. I think he's been with Salesforce for a couple of months now. We have Matthew Halliday, who's a co-founder, vice president of products at Incorda. Matthew's an exceptional guy. Please follow Matthew on Twitter. He's got an incredible soul and spirit. He's a great writer.
Layered Delay, if you're trying to follow him at Layered Delay.
Yeah, Layered Delay, exactly. And I just find him to be super smart, super generous, and has all the characteristics that Tom and Michael talk about in terms of high EQ. I admire smart people, but he's just a really good person, and I know it because we've met in person and we engage on social, and he's just someone you should follow. And of course, one of our favorite guests, return guest, Nicole France. She's vice president, principal analyst at Constellation Research, and we're going to talk about customer experience. We're going to talk about post-pandemic playbook and how companies can build meaningful relationships with their stakeholders, employees, customers, business partners, communities. She's amazing. Always just a delight to have on the show. Now, in addition to this, and usually we don't talk about special shows, but we have non-Friday scheduled shows. Ray and I felt that there's just a lot we need to share during this time where we're still quarantined before we get back to the next norm. So we have a special edition show on Tuesday, June 16th at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard. So it's later in the day, and it's on a
9
Tuesday.
a.m. Australian time if you're in Australia. I wonder why.
Yes, and the reason why Australia time, we have the Honorable Malcolm Turnbull, who's the 29th Prime Minister of Australia, as our guest. We also have Lucy Turnbull, Honorable former Lord Mayor of Sydney. And we have a special guest host, Dr. David Bray, Inaugural Director of Geotech Center and Executive Director of Commission of Geopolitical Impacts of New Technologies and Data at the Atlantic Council. So Dr. David Bray will help Ray and I co-host the 29th Prime Minister of Australia and the Mayor of Sydney. So we're going to talk about globalization, U.S.-China relationships, and many big topics that will certainly define the economic business world of the future post-pandemic. We also have a special edition on Tuesday, July 7th at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern Standard with John Hagel, management consultant, speaker, author, executive director of the Centers at the Edge think tank at Deloitte. And John Hagel is a pioneer in terms of designing organizations for speed and movement and flow. And he's just a big brain keynote speaker and author. So we have just a special edition just with Mr. Hagel, so we can learn from him on July 7th. So 2 special edition. Come back next Friday. I'll remind the teams of these special shows. Ray, closing remarks after what was one of our best episodes of 2020.
I'm not going to add any other fluff to this. Be kind. That's all I can say. Be kind. If it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, audience. We are starting to look at sponsorships. If you're interested, we're probably going to look at a few very, very strategic sponsors who value the thought leadership, who value the editorial independence, and really ability to talk about what we talk about today as we go forward. Welcome to one of the largest audiences for enterprise tech, and of course, other leaders that are impacting startups, organizations, leadership, business, innovation, and of course, be kind. So thanks a lot, everyone.
Be kind.